Dallas had a chance to sweep Minnesota. They did not. The Timberwolves. It was a classic Timberwolves game. Kyle Mann is here. We got the full-fledged Timberwolves experience. We had some knucklehead fouls. We had some dumb turnovers. We had an awful challenge. We had some really stilted shot selection late, and yet none of it mattered. They played good defense. They made a couple stops. They made a couple shots. They win the game. Now it is 3-1 heading back to Minnesota. Kyle, considering they could have won all four of these games and they're down 3-1, like this feels like a closer 3-1 than I think the usual 3-1, right?
Yeah, I feel a little queasy about it because I'm like, you didn't really get great games from Ant and Cat in the first three, and we kept just kind of waiting around. Like Rob and I were texting about, I was like, the Ant game is surely coming. Like we're going to get some semblance of a good game. Tonight he was 11 for 25, 2 for 5 from three, picked his spots 10 rebounds and 9 assists. I mean, he had a lot of the pass before the pass kind of plays. He didn't necessarily make, the pass to like the home run pass, basically, the way Luka frequently does. But overall, I thought, we'll talk about Cat. It seemed like their athleticism was a little bit more impactful in some key spots. There's some other stuff at Dallas, but, it seemed like they were spinning plates throughout this game to keep the offense going. You never really felt like, well, that's just something they're going to over and over again every single time. But they managed to get a big enough game out of Cat to kind of, not as much Nas's game, but a big enough game out of Cat to seal the deal.
Yeah, some timely town shots. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what they were doing because they were playing a little freer and a little looser. They spread the floor better for Ant. They're doing a little 3-1 action with him. And he ended up 25 shots, 8 free throws, and just in general felt more involved. They have some of the same trouble the Celtics do when the Celtics go into fun, although in the Indiana series they didn't do this. When it's late, they just go slow. They the ball goes over midcourt. There's 17 seconds on the shot clock. They're dribbling 40 feet from the basket. There's 8 seconds left. And you're like, go faster, move. But it worked out for them a couple of times. The big sequence was they're down 1. And it felt like Dallas was going to do the Mariano Rivera closer on them again. And Towns hits 2 threes. The first one was like a no-yes 3. Mm-hmm. The second one, Edwards found him in the corner. And that one, you felt like that one was going in. But they were up 5. And once they got that little cushion, that was it. We got to talk about Towns. Because this was when we send the Towns whatever Hall of Fame he ends up going to. That's probably maybe it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, but it's some other Hall of Fame too. It's like the frustrating Hall of Fame, the my God, what a roller coaster ride Hall of Fame, whatever it is. You would send this game tape. He gets 6 fouls. All 6 were terrible fouls. There wasn't one you can't blame him on that one. These were fouls. There was fouls at midcourt. He's fouling Luka on 3s from 28 feet. Each time he didn't think it was a foul.
There was an over the back. There was
the back. He played the hits.
It really was, like I was saying, it really was arguably his magnum opus in terms of dumb fouls. And then he caps it off with a foul in a closeout game. Just what are you doing? And then the way he was pleading about it and arguing about it, you were like, what are you doing? You fouled him. I don't even know what he was arguing about. It was a clear foul, and Luka baited him right into it, man, and he took the bait. Yeah.
Towns is the Michael Jordan of complaining in disbelief on a foul that then they show the replay, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's clearly a foul. On that, he gets his 6th foul. Luka does the little baits him into the double pump and then leans into him on the 3 at the top of the key, and Towns crashes into him. Then he's just in disbelief they called it. But I got to say, he had some big rebounds in the second half in traffic. There was a point where I felt like maybe Finch just leaves him in and just has him foul out naturally to get him out of the game.
Get Nas out there.
Versus having to bench him. It's like, oh, well, you got 6 fouls. You can't play anymore. But, there was a moment during the second quarter I was making up Towns trades because I knew
I was too. I was going to ask you about this. I was like, does the Nas ascendance affect the way we feel about this, because it was just it did seem like there was a little correlation between when Nas would get out there, when they would play with that quote unquote heavy quote unquote smaller lineup. But I was wondering that too. I was going to ask you about that.
Towns, it feels like, should have more advantages in this series than he does, right? He's basically bigger than everyone on the Timberwolves who's not a center. He can't really post up with his back to the basket. When he tries to post up somebody like PJ Washington, doesn't really work out well. So it's a lot of like on the perimeter stuff, and they know that's coming, and they're just kind of sticking with him. It feels like there should be more advantages for him in this series than there is, but I think this speaks to why Towns is such a strange player. Like, he's somebody that, averaged 25 and 10 during his career, and yet a lot of it is like this perimeter based or put back shots, but he never really developed that. Let me at least get on the right block and I can spin into the lane and do my little jump hook. Like, he just doesn't seem to have that arsenal in games like this, which is weird. He's 28 years old.
Early in his career, he had a little bit of that, like, either shoulder kind of, jump hook thing going on.
Yeah,
but he doesn't,
like a Duncanish thing, right? Like, just a little bit, but it's gone.
It was pretty simple. You'd see him get a little of that, like, back to the basket sort of fade thing. But I mean, playing with Gobert, I think, makes some of that a little bit tougher because you're always going to have somebody kind of, sagging into the gap to bother those types of shots. And then the big thing I think for him is just that since he hadn't been shooting the ball super well, he'd been sort of attacking from so far. Dallas had done such a good job of making him start further from the basket. And Cat is like a 1 or 2 dribble repertoire type guy. He's not like a put together 2 or 3, 4 dribble type things. When you get him in, I mean, he had some amazing plays against Denver too down the stretch where he was attacking off of like 2 dribbles and and he's so big and he does finish with some, angularity fairly well. But I think when you push him out there and you make him dance a little bit, he just becomes a little more clumsy and indecisive and picks up stupid fouls. But when he started shooting the ball well, you saw PJ go like, shit, I'm going to have to close on this guy. And then that's when he kind of has a little more leverage and is a little bit more effective.
I can't say I've been knocked out by Minnesota's strategizing. General kind of the mental stuff that goes into playoff games and like kind of shooting yourself in the foot, some of the coaching stuff, some of the lineups they've had, even the stuff they figured out in this game. I'm not sure why they didn't figure out that stuff like after game 1. Some of the stuff they tried to do with Luka, putting Ant on Luka, which
a little less Jaden on Ant was like, there was just like a real stinky vibe of frustration when Jaden was on Luka because Luka just had his number. Like he negated all of his strengths. And with Ant had a couple gambles at times like that are tough with Luka, but overall you just didn't see as much of that. I thought Luka was like insanely aggressive in that first quarter, like offensively, like with his dribble pull-up game. But the Ant thing was working a little bit better, but yeah, they went to that maybe a little too late, honestly.
Luka was 7 for 21. He still ended up with a 28, 15, and 10. And I didn't even feel like he played that well. He made a crazy, what seemed to be a 4-point play when they're down 103-97 with like less than 20 seconds left and gets fouled on a 3, which somehow goes in. And then missed the free throw. And
I knew he was going to miss that. I don't know why. I just had a feeling. It just felt, you could just sense it that it was going to happen. I don't know. Yeah.
And then Kyrie sucked tonight too. He was 6 for 18, 4 turnovers. And this is pretty easy to reduce this series to the Kyrie and Luka points versus the Towns Ant points. But this was the first time they won the battle, and not coincidentally, they won the game. Can we talk a little Luka here?
Absolutely.
Did anything that happened in the last 4 weeks change how you felt about him as a star and what his ceiling was? Or do you feel like this is stuff he's just been doing all along? It's just finally on a bigger stage.
Well, I had him number 4 in the young player rankings, and I just wanted to get that. That's a joke, but about all the shit.
What were those young player rankings? I was getting texts. I'm like, I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, that was just to stay off the internet day. Anyway, I don't know. I don't really feel like I need to defend my stance on Luka. I've been pretty. Go watch my first Luka video on my old channel if anybody wants to, litigate my feelings on him. I'm sometimes too far on Luka. Like I think he's incredible. What about Luka specifically? I mean, like, did my feelings change?
Like last 4 weeks, did anything change about what you had already thought?
I mean, I thought he was like in the top 3 in the world for sure. And he's kind of hovered in that top 3 to 5 range, but like, the movement of some of these guys not being able to, out of sight, out of mind with Steph a little bit. LeBron's aged out. Durant has kind of moved out of that. And you've seen Jokic and Doncic kind of move forward. I still had Jokic as the best player in the world. But I mean, Luka's right there. So honestly, no, not really. I mean, I've had a lot of respect for his game, and that hasn't really changed much at all in the past 4 weeks. He's just, I mean, what more do we need to see from him? I mean, he's already done it in big playoff stages to this point. So, the finals would be nice, but no, I haven't had a huge shift.
He's going to be an unbelievable, assuming it's going to be Mavs Celtics, unless we have the biggest comeback in the history of basketball. He's going to be an unbelievable villain. I was on some text threads with some Celtic fan friends, and we're just all ready. We're just ready to be annoyed by this guy for 2 weeks. Even today, I would say the Mavs actually got a more favorable whistle than Dallas in this game. Everybody in Minnesota felt like they were in foul trouble at one point, and Luka still, every time they go to a timeout, he's going to the ref, and it looks like he's like pleading with a meter maid not to put the ticket on the car. It's just his demeanor. I think it's going to go over great in Boston. He is oh no, it's going to go terribly. He's going to get razzed, yelled, heckled. People are going to hate him.
How many shut the fuck ups per game do you think you're going to get in that Boston accent towards Luka?
Hey, Luka, shut up! Shut the hell up!
Luka does the ultimate. He does the ultimate masterful thing where when he gets calls, he complains and pouts. He does the thing like he's just like, oh, like finally. It's like, really, man, come on. And I think a funny thing about this series is just the sort of hand fighting that has been allowed to go on that has been to Minnesota's advantage to this point, like that colliding with the way that Luka plays, I think has just created so many more of these moments. And I agree with you. It has at times felt like Minnesota's gotten a tough whistle, but that's just Luka drags you into the mud, and like that's the way he plays. And he knows that when guys get out of position, he knows how to create the contact, how to make it look a certain way. He finishes through contact. He just doesn't let you off the hook ever, basically, with that stuff.
Yeah, and everything is so purposeful, whereas you're watching Edwards at age 22, and it's such a work in progress. Like today, he's like, I have to get to the rim or my team's going to lose. And he's like, I'm going to try to get to the rim. Oh, they blocked me. I'm going to dribble it back out. I'm going to wait 5 seconds. I'm going to try to get to the rim again. That's not there either. I'm going to spin back. I'm going to try to get to the rim again. And it was like watching the super early Jordan tapes from like 87, 88, or like watching Kobe in the first few years where they knew what they had to do, but they didn't have the whole toolbox yet to do what they needed to do. So it was just like, I'm going to use my athletic ability and I'm going to get to the rim and good things will happen. And then occasionally, I think one of the things that makes him special is he'll just randomly pull out like just the gorgeous Tim Duncan 15-foot bank shot, and he'll just soar above. And it's just, so you can see like 2-3 years from now when he can combine like the pace with the acceleration, and then he'll have the turnaround jumper in 2 years. That'll be in his bag. He'll have that bank shot. He'll probably have some sort of on the corner thing that he'll be able to do. He'll be able to shoot threes off picks better. And it'll just be like 5 little small things, and he'll be at 30 points a game. Like he'll be at 30 points a game guy within 2 years, right?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you could kind of quibble about like how efficient he'll be doing that, but I think that he's done a lot better job. I think he's done a lot better job picking his spots. I mean, that was the main thing that really, really worried me coming into the league and in his first season in the league. But you kind of see, I was talking with Kevin about this on the draft show, that like, you see scorers like Ant come into the league and they have almost like, the comparison I make is they have like 4:3 aspect ratio with the way they see the court. They're like, I'm either going to score or I'm going to make this simple kind of pass to my guy. And you kind of see them as they get older expand out to 16-9, where it's like they can see the sort of width of the floor a lot better. And you're seeing Ant do that stuff. But I do think it's interesting to kind of like compare them developmentally, where it's like, I've been reflecting, you were talking about, has it shifted with Luka? Like, it's like, do we fully appreciate him? And I was just thinking back about when he came into the league, and it's like, it is kind of absurd, especially looking at the lack of talent in this class, and you look at the international guys, it is kind of absurd how much some people disrespected the quality of the EuroLeague when like you consider like an 18-year-old winning the MVP, like how insane that is. And just watching their processing speed, Ant's athleticism gives him such a huge advantage to even get into the conversation. But it's like Luka, it just kind of shows you how far ahead Luka is. Granted, he's a little older, but like he was doing that stuff he was doing a lot of those really, really advanced reads at this age that Ant is at now. And I just think he's the best pick and roll player in the world. I was telling you, I think he's arguably the best ever. You could kind of quibble about Nash, but I just think he's a phenomenal talent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because in the 70s and 80s, they weren't thinking about setting screens that far away from the basket, right? A lot of it, the big thing was like either the two-man game or setting somebody a pick at like the foul line because everything was so compacted, and the three-point shot spread it out. So sometimes I think, there's so many guys from that era who would have been so interesting with the way basketball is played now. But he seems like the most unstoppable version of set me a pick 30 feet from the basket and the other team doesn't really know what to do. Like they were talking today a lot on the telecast about Gobert kept like sagging off and Reggie and Stan Van Gundy didn't understand why he kept sagging off. But I think it was because they just decided they didn't want to give up that little like lob for the little 8-foot or the roll or the dunk or whatever. And they were just basically like, let's just try to play good defense on Luka and stay near him and hope he misses some shots. I like the shots he took today. A lot of them just weren't going in. I'm not sure that strategy is going to work again in game 5. It's almost like in football where each series you got to switch the defense that you're throwing at them. So in game 5, they're going to have to, they can't run back the exact same thing because he's too good. He'll figure it out. The one thing I felt like from a Dallas standpoint, they got this crazy Jaden Hardy stretch. I think they were about to lose by like double figures. And then Jaden Hardy had this really crazy, awesome stretch that kind of kept them kind of lingering around in the game because they weren't playing that well. On the road, you're not getting the Jaden Hardy taking over the game for 4 minutes, I don't think.
Yeah. The young guys gets beer muscles and feels a little bit bigger. But Hardy's a guy who's just like historically always had crazy confidence. He did a good job, I will say. On court, he did a good job of like not overdoing it. I felt like he maybe had one spot, maybe another where he did that. But like, I will say, like, I know you're confident, but like, I don't know about barking at Anthony Edwards. Like, I don't know if that's the move. I would maybe just kind of stay in my lane a little bit. Like, even if you think you're better than him, just like don't tempt fate there. That was a questionable move to me. I was like, I know. Speaks how confident he is that he would go and do that, but I don't know that I would have.
Yeah, they probably told him after the game, listen, if you're going to talk shit, just talk shit to Rudy Gobert. That's what we're all doing. Just say stuff to him. Nobody likes Rudy Gobert. It'll be all
He's
fine.
the pin cushion where we put all.
So when you watch Rudy in a series like this, and they're almost definitely going to lose because again, the only way for them to win this series is to do something nobody's done in 150 plus series. Is Rudy somebody that you can win 4 straight playoff series with, just in general, with all the different styles of teams you have to play over the course of 4 rounds? Is it just conceivable that he's a guy who could be on a title team? Because I've changed my mind 20 times on this.
Yeah, I don't know that I would blame him for this in particular because, they have other problems like you were talking about. I honestly feel like you made a really good comparison, I think, with the Boston and Minnesota thing offensively, because when the core of your team are guys that are sort of guys with scoring tilt who are learning to play make, you kind of run into these guys like Tatum and Brown both are like, they've been learning on the job since they've been playing together to sort of learn to play that way. And it doesn't always come instinctively. Whereas you watch, I was like prodding you the other night with the Halliburton text about is he the best of the series? And then you mentioned it. I laughed at that. But no, I mean, like a Halliburton or somebody, when you have a guy like that at the core of your team, you're not going to run into those problems as much. So just to speak to Rudy, though, like, I think that it can happen. It's just, maybe he's just somebody that you have to be smart about when he's on and off the floor, because that, Minnesota has kind of done that in spots. And you've seen that, like tonight, his impact defensively was there. Like, I think the fact that they didn't have Lively there as a lob threat when Gafford wasn't in there. Kyrie, you could see Kyrie was affected by Rudy, I think, in some pretty key moments. And this is, whether or not it's this round or it's the finals or the first round, this is a high level matchup. And he affected the game in a positive way, I thought. And in the short roll, he actually had some pretty good moments, I thought. He wasn't required to like do anything like heavy improv, but he finished pretty well, I thought. And did played within himself in that sense offensively, I thought.
Well, dirt had been poured on his entire career over the last 2 days. I was thinking about like the take seesaw on certain guys, where if the seesaw, normally you want a seesaw that's a little balanced and it goes a little up, a little down. And with Rudy, it's like one side of the seesaw is always on the ground. And then if it flips to the other side, it's back on the ground. Like he's either the defensive player of the year or he's the biggest liability in the league. And there's just no balance in the both. I actually thought some of the stuff Towns did with him today. Towns had a couple nice little dishes to him on drives, and felt like they complemented each other. But there's other times, to me, it's on Minnesota. Like when he's 35 feet from the basket trying to guard Luka, it's just not going to go well. And if you see the reverse, like Dallas is really smart. Anytime they had somebody in a position that far away from the basket they weren't happy with, they would just send a second guy out and then try to recover fast. And it felt like Minnesota really wasn't doing that much until today. So who knows? It feels like they're getting a little better. And then you think on the other side, Dallas seemed like they were getting a little worse. And some of the stuff that was working for them in the other games wasn't working as well. The big catch is that they didn't have Lively. And
I never thought we would be saying, like last fall, I never ever thought that we would be having this conversation in a conference finals. Like I liked Lively, but like I'm shocked by this.
Well, he was really polarizing. We were doing the draft pods, and I didn't follow college hoops, so I'm leaning on you guys and studying YouTube clips. But Lively was the most polarizing guy in that top 12, because especially when he went to Dallas, I remember, was it you or was it KOC when somebody was like, oh, that's actually like, that's a team that plays to his strengths. That's a pretty good fit for him. But I mean, to think that he would be playing and somebody that could pass out of like those little lobs, and just the creativity that he's had at that position for his age, I think has been unusual. So somehow they get rewarded for throwing away the season last year, which I still can't figure out.
Yeah, when he was in high school, he got rated, I think, like people were projecting what he could be. Actually, like the shooting was something that was a piece of the puzzle for him, that people thought he would shoot it eventually. And I'm not ruling that out, but I mean, It seems fairly unlikely. But like he just kind of defensively looked lost at times. But the more that you leaned in and watched it, the kind of conclusion I came to was just that he was thinking so much that his reaction time was getting kind of negated. And you saw him sort of like learn. And if you listen to the guy talk, he's a bright kid. Like, and I think that he just sort of had to learn to play high level coverages and stuff. And
is it possible though that some guys are just better with better teammates? Because I've always felt that way with basketball, that we always forget that part. That maybe like that Duke team was a mess a year ago, right?
Yeah, they didn't really. Duke has had a few teams like this where they didn't have a ton of great creators, like in terms of like guys who could score and get off the ball. They had like a guy named Jeremy Roach who was like a scorer, didn't get off the ball. And then they had a guy named Tyrese Proctor who could pass, but he couldn't really score. So you just had these weird spacing issues on those teams that did penalize, somebody like him, where he's not a table setter. He's a patron. He dines. And Luka obviously is the ultimate, 3 Michelin star chef. And it couldn't have been. I'm sure I probably did say it on draft night, but a lot of people did that. Like he's a guy who can catch lobs. He's very fast. He has really great hip mobility for a guy his size. And I wrote about this in the rookie guide over and over again, that like you just absolutely could not have picked a better partner for him coming in the league. But I think in this game, they did miss his short roll decision making in a way that I think like Minnesota was like, okay, we will give you a little bit of drop coverage here because we're not as worried about these lobs, and we're not as worried about maybe Derrick Jones Jr. shooting threes or PJ shooting threes. And I think that affected them because you had to respect Lively in the middle of the floor. And I think that kind of took away from some of their easy buckets, honestly.
So our friend Chris Nowinski, who has done incredible stuff with concussions really since the late 2000s, and every once in a while I mention him, he had a tweet a couple of hours ago about Lively and this neck sprain thing in the game 3, because I watched and I was like, it was clear it was concussion. He was groggy after and looked like his brains had been scrambled. It had all the makings. Like if it happened in football, it would just be like, that's concussion. And they said neck sprain. And Chris Nowinski tweeted just 2 hours ago, I don't believe the Derek Lively neck sprain story. In the NFL, that's a concussion. He couldn't stand for minutes. He's showing the clip that he has under the tweet. You can see he can't balance and would fall walking without help. NBA, please don't undo years of concussion education meant to protect kids. I thought from the evidence, it was really hard for me to believe that was a sprained neck. And, I think maybe they were assuming that the series would be over, but usually like a concussion, like Jaylen Brown had one for the Celtics, and he wasn't right for over a week. So we'll see. Like people seem to think he's come back game 5. I don't know why they wouldn't tell us exactly what happened, but I think you and I both had the same reaction. That's pretty clearly seemed like I don't know how that wasn't a concussion.
That was hard to watch, man. Like I can't imagine like getting hit. I mean, that's one of like I don't know how he got up from that at all. Like I thought for sure concussion. Maybe they just they said it's also a neck sprain. Maybe he really does have a neck sprain, but he also has. I just
well, he was on the bench today and it's bright in those arenas, and he didn't have sunglasses on and was fine. So who knows? I don't really know the answer, but I thought that was a weird one. They're going to need him for game 5. Minnesota, who has no home court advantage at all, and you would think like, well, if anybody's going to come back from 3-0, it's a team that has 5 and 7 at home, because you send it back, you win 5, then if you can somehow win 6 or put the other team in position to be on their heels in a game 6 at home, knowing they'd have to go back to your place in a game 7, that would be the sequence you'd want. And yet Minnesota sucks at home. And everybody sucks at home. We talked about this on the Mahoney Chris Ryan pod that we did on Thursday. Do you have a theory on why home court has gone out the window?
No, honestly, I don't understand what it's about. It's maybe it's just that like a lot of these arenas sound the same, or that like I honestly don't have any kind of idea that maybe it's not as unique the way. I mean, you're a historian on this. Is there anything that's changed about the way they set up the seats, or I feel like there aren't as many like unique kind of quirks. Like I feel like that stuff's all like audited really well. Like the weird Milwaukee Bucks court, like in the late 70s. Like you don't see anything like that really anymore. People would always complain about like the Omni. Didn't people used to say that the Omni was like kind of drafty in there? That like right. I just feel like everything is kind of that's true in a lot of different ways. I just think things have just kind of become homogenized maybe, and that's why it just doesn't feel as I don't know. I'm grasping for straws for why it's happening.
No, I think that's a decent reason. Like they used to say about the old Boston Garden, like there was dead spots on the parquet.
Yeah.
People would smoke at halftime. The whole place is filled with smoke. You had cheaper seats, so you had the crowd was pretty close to the court, and people that were really into the games. The locker rooms were terrible. The Celtics would shut off the air conditioning or the heat depending on what time of season to fuck with the other team. And like all that stuff's out the window. I think the what you said about everything being homogenous, like I do, you feel that when you're watching 4 games at once on a Wednesday night. You have no idea which arena's which. They all seem the same. The seats seem the same. That's why what the Clippers are trying to do with this new arena is so interesting to me, because they're going to have this wall of fans, and they're going to have, they built it like the Indiana arena where everybody's really close to the court. And if that doesn't make a difference, then maybe the ship has sailed on home court. It happened in hockey. Like we watched it happen over the last 20 years where all of a sudden it just didn't matter where you played in hockey. You could win anywhere. So, so anyway, Minnesota's going back home, and I don't know if it makes a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of feels like doesn't it really kind of feel like Dallas really needs to win this next game? Because I feel like based on the way that last series went, especially if you're not going to have Lively, and I was also thinking about the fact that Lively kind of plays like in scrum all the time. He's always flying around. He's always in traffic.
Right. He's a little compromised.
He also is like a wide receiver running over the middle with like, these big bodies kind of looming. I'm just kind of like, makes me wonder if he'll maybe be thinking about it a little bit, if that's going to have an effect on him. But it does just kind of feel like the oh shit meter is going to kind of start to go up a little bit if they can't. But I don't think that you're going to get the same, like the shot making thing was just not there tonight, like in the way that it had been in the past 3 games. And I just don't know per like the variance if you're going to be able to bank on that happening again if you're Minnesota.
14 for 30 on threes tonight. Towns, who averaged 22 and 8 during the season and was almost a 50, 45, 90 guy. He was 52, 47, 87. His 7 games before tonight, he was 16 and 10, 37% shooting, 17% from 3. And then tonight he was 4 for 5 from 3, 25 and 5, 6 fouls. It was the Townsiest game possible, for better and worse. Just out of curiosity, I did make up a couple Towns trades thinking that they might lose tonight.
Well, you had to.
He's got 4 years, $221 million after this season, but he's $36 million basically through June. So his cap figure is actually pretty tradable. 4 trades. I'm just going to throw these at you. By the way, he's still in the playoffs. I feel bad, but this is good content. I'm just doing it.
This is going to be very adored segment.
Just assuming Minnesota's out, which is gonna and it's like, wow, Towns didn't play that well. Towns to Washington for Kuzma in the 2nd pick. Too much or too little?
I wouldn't do that if I'm Minnesota.
You wouldn't do that.
I don't think so.
Because remember, they're going to be like 70 over. They're going to be like second apron, the whole thing with the salaries they have now.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I'm just not a big Kuzma guy, and I'm trying to think about if you were ever not going to do it in a draft. I feel like it would be this one because they're not going to be in the SAR business. I wouldn't think with the types of defenders they have. And I'm trying to think of who else would even. They're not going to get Klingon. Maybe Rob Dillingham or somebody really talented. You take a chance on that. I don't know that I'd go. What's
Conley replacement?
Yeah. Okay. Dillingham and Conley. I don't know. I'll be curious to get your opinion on that one in a month if we revisit this. But what's the next one?
Just Towns and Ingram. Some sort. I don't know who throws in what, but a little flipperoo with those 2 guys. It's a little intriguing.
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah, it kind of makes you wonder what they would be doing. Okay, and then you'd have Towns with the Pelicans is interesting. It is. Give him a little bit more spacing with some of those creators. Give him Towns with Zion. I mean, there's a big bet that he's even healthy, but Towns with Zion would be pretty interesting.
Well, that's what I was thinking for New Orleans. I think you do it in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
For Minnesota with Ingram, he's got an extension coming. I think I need more than Ingram. Especially like Ingram come off. He was bad in Team USA. I don't think he had a great season. I don't think he's a distressed asset, but I think you'd have to get some picks in that one too. There's Towns for Murray and Capella's expiring. It's expiring next year. But could you turn Towns into DeJounte Murray? Does that make sense for either team? We'd get Towns and Trae Young together. There's something there. And then could he be in a 3-teamer or a 4-teamer with my ring around the rosy? As you know, one of my summer missions is to get Mikal Bridges to the Knicks because I think that's what the Knicks want. But could Towns go to Brooklyn? Randall in a first goes to Minnesota, or Randall in a first goes to Atlanta, and Trae Young goes somewhere, and Bridges goes to the Knicks. Maybe there's like an asset merry-go-round that Towns could be a part of. I gotta say, I probably if those were my 4 trades, I think I'm keeping Towns for another year.
I think so too. Yeah,
because I think all of that stuff either sends me backwards or sideways, and I already know what I have. I have a team that made the conference finals, and Towns, the really 2 bad years of his deal doesn't kick in for 2 more years. So I think. Not to do the thing where I started an argument with myself and then talked myself out of it. But I think those are the type of trades on the table. I don't think they're doing better than that kind of neighborhood.
I'm trying to think of offensively who could use him. I like Towns and Trey together. God, I just think that would be a reality TV show waiting to happen. You think about Towns in Brooklyn, and you're just like, well, Brooklyn's just kind of void of form in general. So it's like, sure, why not? We'll take Towns. I don't know. Murray with the Wolves. I think you ideally would want to get somebody with some like connective kind of playmaking in there. Is that where do the Wolves, let's say hypothetically, they lose the series and don't come back? Where do you look for maybe an upgrade? Conley has been such a steadying force, but long term, do you want to bet on him? Right? Like, do you want to bet on? Because I mean, he looked done a couple years ago when Brunson lit his ass up in the playoffs. I'm just trying to think of like how can they upgrade that, because they don't really get as much of that playmaking out of Anderson all the time. I'm just like that's where I see them needing an upgrade.
So turning Towns into some sort of guard. I think I agree, because Conley, to me, it's so funny because he played with Horford forever. He's very similar to Horford, right? As a stopgap big minutes guy, great. But ultimately, I'm not sure that's his destiny on a team that needs to win 4 straight rounds because he's old.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd want him in that Horford role where he could play big minutes, but ultimately it would be, maybe you're better off if it's 20 to 25 minutes a game, picking spots. When guys are resting, maybe he plays a big thing. Yeah, I don't know what the ideal Towns trade is.